So we're here for another Ask Me Anything. But what I want you to know about first, before we get into all of your great questions and my suggestions, is the fact that we're more emotionally challenged than probably ever in our lives. And let's see, for some reason, I'm hearing some feedback. Let me just see if I can fix that real quick. Okay, hopefully that'll take care of it. So what I was saying is we have this incredible opportunity to really take a look at, the emotional health of our families right now, because more than ever, we've been challenged at a really kind of like in the deep seated parts of ourselves, and where we can feel secure, where we can rest into has been shaken. And what that might be looking like in your families and in your body, your mind and heart, is a greater level of uncertainty, maybe feeling more fragility or more sensitivity than usual. Perhaps even you're seeing your kids behave a bit differently, like they're more anxious about things than they used to be. Maybe they're a little more sluggish or kind of depressed than they used to be. Or they're kind of zany with excitement and don't always know how to sort of rein it in. And this makes sense. We've been, many of us have been in situations that have been uncharted territory. And so, of course, we're struggling. So I want you to know that I am doing a special session, bringing back one of my most popular workshops that really helps us understand what's happening when big emotions are running through our nervous systems and start to shape the way that we behave. And it's information for us so that we can know ourselves and have more self-awareness and self sort of regulation strategies and et cetera. But more importantly, it's for us to understand what's happening for our kids when they're experiencing these big emotions, because they rely on us. Whether it looks like they are or not in the moment, they rely on us for guidance on how to navigate meltdowns, how to navigate tantrums, often a combination of like sad and angry and maybe even some shame and embarrassment, how to navigate power struggles and other kinds of conflicts, so that instead of sort of wearing ourselves down as a family, we can build ourselves up, so we can have a lot of tools and strategies and can learn so much from these events. So I want you to know right away that I have this session coming up. I'll drop the link in the chat really soon in the comments here so you can access it. If you're on the Raising Our Resilience page where it just has the hands and not my profile, and you're not in the group, I'll make sure to put it in the post so you can go ahead and click over to the webinar and register. It's this Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, and you won't regret coming. You really will want to go ahead and register by clicking on the link. You just put in your name and email, and I will kick you some reminders, so it'll be easy for you to join with the Zoom link and everything. And it'll be your chance to kind of wrap your head around some of the principles, some of the research, some of the really great sort of insights that you need to be able to show up how you want to emotionally for yourselves, and for the rest of your family members, especially your kids right now. So I want you to have that first top of mind. Now, next, I have a bunch of great questions here that have been, thrown my way because parents are wondering, how do we do a lot of these things right now? And when people come to my group and join it, one of the things that I do is I ask them, what are you most wanting to know? Oops, hold on. What are you most wanting to know right now in your parenting world? Like, what can I most help you with? And they bring me back these great questions. And so I'll be answering some of those today. And some of them are really broad, but I'm gonna do my best to at least give you a sense of where to start. Okay. Now this, of course, will only be the first step. First step on a journey. We can't really solve it all at once. So we'll do our best here. All right. So first question I wanted to address, let's see, comes from a mom that is, really wanting to make sure that she is setting her kids up for success. I can tell that she's got a big old heart because she's really, taking the effort to be here and really check out this question. And so I'm just making sure I've got it here. So it looks like this is from, let's see, JH would be, sorry, Jessica Hart. Okay. Jessica Hart with the big heart. Hi, Jessica. Oh, we're answering your question now. So Jessica, one of the things that you asked is, how can I constructively teach and discipline my children? You want to find ways to do it constructively. So let's just look at the word constructive and discipline right now, because I think that oftentimes we think of discipline, first of all, as a thing you do when the kids are crossing lines. Yeah, that it's something that comes as a reaction or a response to breaking a rule or not following an expectation, maybe not listening, pushing back, doing things on purpose that they're not supposed to, those kinds of things. And so what I'm guessing here is what you're talking about with teaching and disciplining your children. You want to go beyond reacting in the moment and that kind of discipline. Like you would love to, for example, have your kids already know the rules and expectations ahead of time and even maybe collaborate with you to create them so that they are much more likely to follow them. And that's exactly what I would be suggesting you step into first, okay? So oftentimes we start with what's bothering us and what's bugging us, what we're repeating ourselves over and over and over again, and we can turn those into really constructive conversations. So Jessica and anyone else who's listening to this who is feeling like, man, I really want more constructive ways to teach and discipline my kids, let's just pick one for now. So my hot tip that I used to do with all my interns and all the teachers I was training and also with my clients is I say, what have you found yourself repeating over and over again? And even saying things like, how come I have to tell you again? Or this is the 10th time I've told you. Or, oh my gosh, how come my kid doesn't get this yet? Or you might even say it to them, like, what's wrong with you? Like, how come you're doing this again? So it's probably some kind of rule they're not following or some routine, part of the routine that they're just not doing. And so we often go, is this motivation? Is this discipline? What is this? So no matter what the reason is, it can always be helpful to notice the thing that you're repeating yourself over and over again. So I've got some folks tuning in on Facebook. I've got some folks here on Zoom. If anybody has one that's even listening to the recording, what is something that you find yourself repeating over and over again? A reminder, a reminder, a reminder, a reminder. And it's kind of driving you a little bonkers. So go ahead and put that in the chat, in the comments. What is something that you find yourself repeating over and over and over again? Jessica, I would challenge you to find one too, okay? What is that thing you just keep saying over and over again? Okay, so from it embedded in that, within that repetition, there is an opportunity. And the opportunity is to get really, really clear. And this is in my setting limits pillar of my 7 pillars. Get really, really clear about what it is you're asking for exactly. Sometimes we're just like, oh, how come I have to tell you to clean up again? Well, clean up again is kind of broad, right? So let's get really specific. Okay, what am I actually wanting them to do? So I would like them to bring their dishes to the sink and rinse them off and put them in the dishwasher and close the dishwasher door. Okay, much more clear. So then the next time you are about to have dinner, you can say ahead of time, you can say, hey, before we eat, I just wanted to make sure everybody understands that we share responsibility in cleaning up. And depending on how old they are, is how size of words and vocabulary, but just like, hey, this is important. And before we start eating, can we all agree to pick up our plates, take them to the sink, rinse them off, put them in the dishwasher, and close the dishwasher door? Can we all agree to do that? And you can even ask, did I miss anything? So you can kind of get some input. And what you're doing is you're getting ahead of that disciplining moment. Do you see? By becoming clear about what you want. Also, instead of focusing on what you don't want, focus on what you do want. I tell this to my clients all the time, and they make this shift, and it takes sometimes 100 times of practicing because we are very good at saying, hey, stop that. Don't leave a mess. Don't bother your sister, right? But we have a harder time sometimes in the moment thinking of what we do want them to do instead, or what their other options are to meet that need, right? So focusing on what you do want and being really clear about it, and then getting ahead of that disciplining moment by sharing it with them before you even get to that spot, and then seeing if you can get their agreement. Like, okay, and even check for understanding. The teachers know this really well. We can explain something, but we can say, okay, but what did you understand from that? So even right now, I'm going to model that with you in the chat. Go ahead and put, what did you understand from what I just shared? What is really helpful to do when you're trying to discipline your child and get them to listen to you, especially for things you find yourself repeating over and over again? I'll let you go ahead and write it. I can also summarize it, because another thing we know is that we have to hear things more than once to learn them. So what you would do is get really clear about what you do want, share that with your kids ahead of the disciplining moment, and then make sure you have their comprehension and agreement before you hold them to it, okay? A lot of times parents, and the number one thing to mistake we need to avoid is assuming that they already know what your expectations are and exactly what it means when you say things like, don't make a mess. Okay, let's take the assumptions out of it, because you know what it turns you and me into. Good. Jessica says, tell them what I want, not what you don't want. You need to work on this. Jessica, good. I'm so glad you grabbed that one. That's a powerful one. If you can hold on to that one for this next week, and then come back on next Monday at 2 and share what happened, what shifted for you, that would be amazing. I'd love to hear that, because it's just one step of getting more constructive. And I wanted to talk about constructive a little bit. So what's the difference between a constructive way of disciplining and maybe the opposite, which would be destructive? When I think of constructive, I think of, okay, there's more of a sense of a teamwork. There's more a sense of learning. Your lid is on, or you're like kind of keeping your cool. So you're like having this opportunity to choose your response rather than just reacting. And I also think of it as, not defaulting to, maybe how others have handled discipline, whether it was a caregiver or a teacher or something that we might emulate by accident, kind of by default. So when I think of constructive, I really want to think about agency, right? Like what do I have control over here? And realizing that we actually can control our responses a lot more than we give ourselves or our children credit for. And if we just kind of call ourselves to that task of like, okay, can I bring some awareness? This is in my emotional mastery side of things, out of the 7 pillars. we did setting limits, Jessica, for you now. We're in emotional mastery. Can I add some awareness here to be able to see, like, what is it that's really bothering me? What do I really need? And what do I really want to ask for here? Which would be a much more constructive response than, hey, don't do that, or, oh, I can't believe you're doing that again, or, hey, listen to me, which we can default to, or we can have as a more destructive or reactive response. Why does this matter? Well, first of all, our kids learn a ton more from what we do than what we say. So if we're telling them to be calm and we're not calm, or if we're telling them to be respectful, but we're talking to them in a way that's snappy, it sends mixed messages, right? So how can we get congruent? We can get congruent by taking a moment to check in and say what it would be the most constructive response here. And one of the things you can do, Jessica, right, is ask for what you do want and be really clear about what that is. Last part about that is being sensitive to when you give feedback and when you give a lot of information that engages that sort of front part of the brain, which we have in our hand model. Because if their lid is flipped, you're probably not going to have a whole lot of luck with the engaging them with the thoughts that you want them to start to think through. So be sensitive with your timing, really become kind of like a lid detector. Oh, hi, Eileen. Glad you're here on Zoom. Let me know what it is that you're pulling out of this piece too. Because I've got here Jessica, who's, sharing with me that she's saying, yes, I need this. This is good. Good. Okay, Jessica. And some of these things we know, like we kind of know, but like knowing is different than practicing, and practicing is different from mastering, where it's just, you're in the flow. And I'll be honest with you folks, like even with mentors and even with folks around me that I was emulating, it took me about 3 years to feel really comfortable doing things like getting ahead of that disciplining moment, taking that breath to make sure I'm responding and not reacting. Um, finding ways to share information with kids where they would really listen, right? Offering choices in the moment. Like there's all these skills that I built over years and that I now share with parents. So another thing I just have to say is, Jessica, you want to construct a whole way of, being a constructive discipliner, to be able to teach your kids as they're going through these problems. And I just want to say, take one step at a time, pace yourself, it's okay. And know that even a 1 degree change every single day adds up to 17 times the results over a year. So even if you just catch yourself once asking for what you don't want instead of what you do want, and you shift that, even if you just do that once a day, it'll start to build into a practice, okay? A habit, and it'll become more and more constructive. Eileen, no problem. It's okay that you joined late. I'm always welcome anytime. Glad you're here. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Now, Jessica, this next one might have something you want to know about too. So just maybe hang in here with me. Okay, so this next one, I'm going to throw it into the comments here of the Facebook group. Those of you who are listening on the business page, which just says like Raising Our Resilience, the yellow thing, and you're going to want to join the group to watch this entire Ask Me Anything, okay? So be sure to hop over there as well as register for the webinar. And before I forget, let me go ahead and put the webinar link into the chat and comments, because you don't want to miss this one. This is really about emotional mastery. This is where you get to like get down with meltdowns and feel more and more comfortable with them, see why they're important and useful, learn what you can do when your kids are having them. And not all meltdowns are created equal. Some of them are small. Some of them just look like a kid shrinking away and getting fearful and quiet. Others are big and loud and they throw things. Others are, holding a grudge for 2 weeks in our preteens and teens. So it can look a lot of different ways. And this workshop is for all of it. Okay. So be sure to sign up, Eileen and Jessica. Okay, but I threw up the next one, which is, how do I set limits with 2 high energy boys and get them to listen without yelling at them? So see how these are connected, right? Constructive discipline of 2 high energy boys. Not easy, yeah. And what I like about this question, and I'm just kind of pulling up the name of who asked it here, it's you, Eileen. This is yours. Yes. Okay. At 5 and 8 years old, how do you get through to them without having to sort of be like big and loud, especially when they're being big and loud? Eileen, I hear you. That's not easy. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll tag you here in the Facebook group so you'll know where to find this again, if you want to come back to the recording. Okay. So what I can say is that when kids are high energy and they're bringing a lot of intensity, sometimes we do have to match them in some ways in order to sort of join the party enough for you to even show up on their radar. So I've done this so many times where I've got 2 kids who are like really dynamic and they're like kind of feeding off each other. And I'm imagining your boys do this, Eileen, feeding off of each other. Tell me if I'm right, Eileen. And one goes and the other goes, and the next thing you know, it's like spiraling out of control and it's way too rough, or it's too loud, or they're ignoring you when you're telling them to stop or trying to get them to maybe come and do something else. And it's almost like they've got this little team going. Yes, and I was about to say that, Eileen, nice. I mean, not nice, it's kind of awful for you, but sometimes someone gets hurt. And then it's intensity of tears and anger and maybe retaliation of hitting back or whatever. And it can be such a mess. Yeah. Okay. So what I was starting to say is we have to meet their intensity sometimes just to even be relevant by getting into their world. And so what I would say is, don't worry so much about the fact that you're yelling. I would focus more about your tone in yelling and your intention, right? So if you need to get big and loud, then get big and loud. That's going to happen sometimes, and it's okay. I can tell you because I've done it, even in situations where I felt like I really shouldn't be, because I'm a teacher and I'm in, like in a situation where there's like 40 kids or something, but occasionally you just have to do it. You got to get loud. So getting loud is different from yelling at. So I wanted to make that distinction. Eileen, is that helpful? I want you to hear it, okay? So big and loud doesn't necessarily mean yelling at or being angry. So there are many ways to be big and loud. You can do it actually with a tone of sort of humor and joy, like, whoa, hey here, everybody, wow. And that might be way outside of your personality, but something you could try on to match the energy level of your kids enough so they can even see you. Because otherwise you're this like kind of invisible, quiet sort of force over here that they're ignoring, they're tuning out. So you can do it kind of like in a way of like, I've also done clapping, which is sounds funny, but I've done it with 5 and 8-year-olds and it does get their attention. I go, all right, what's going on here? Just like that. Another thing I've done is I've physically gotten in between the kids and go, whoa, hey, like just like do a big gesture. You can get big and loud without getting angry. And oftentimes what we do is we are quieter and reasonable and we're modeling that calm. We think it's going to, bring them down. And sometimes it does, but then we get frustrated. And then our big and loud is coming from that frustration where it's like, ah, right? And you yell at them. And trust me, I've gotten there too. So if we can head that off, kind of rewind and go, okay, I tried it quietly. That's not working. How about if I get big and loud before I get frustrated in a fun way or in a dramatic way, in a noticeable way, okay? And also another thing you're going to want to watch, Eileen, because you've got your boys boys can be really sensitive to physical body language, even more than girls. Girls are really more sensitive to facial expressions and tone of voice. Typically, that's the bell curve. Not every boy, every girl, but in general, on average. So you want to use your body language to really show. So like if you're trying to step in between them and you're kind of like half in, half out, they're not going to read that as you mean it. They're not going to take you seriously. You like how I'm just giving you all like in the moment tips, Eileen? Okay. You're going to want to almost sort of like take a power in these power poses, power poses like this that they say you should do before public speaking, for example, because it kind of tricks your nervous system into like believing that you're strong and you're confident and you're ready for anything. Well, you can communicate to your boys that way too. And so I have done a thing where I'm trying to step between two kids and I actually go like, I like squat down and I put my hands like this and I'm like, whoa. And I get kind of larger and really stable and really strong. My coach calls it, a coach I work with who calls them fear melters. And she says, when you feel like you're 1 foot out and 1 foot in and you're kind of dancing back and forth, sumo up, she says, borrowing from the sumo wrestler pose, the traditional Japanese wrestling, where they really like put their legs down and really create a shape, right? So those are some ways you can get into the mix and feel powerful and effective. So Eileen, I want to give you some in the moment strategies. Yeah. Tell me that one thing you grab that you're going to try next. Okay. Because I want to be able to see what it is that you pulled out of that you might try. Which is also good for you because then you're like, okay, what was that one thing I learned with Vanessa? Oh yeah, I'm gonna sumo up, or oh yeah, I'm gonna be big and loud before I'm frustrated, or whatever it is for you. Okay, Eileen, let me know. Let us all know. But I also want to circle back to like generally like what does it mean to have high energy kids? Okay, so high energy, so children are constructing themselves constantly, even more than adults. Adults don't have that urge, that urge to necessarily. Some of us have like an incredible amount of love of learning, or just like constantly trying new things and testing things and figuring ourselves out. But it kind of slows down in our mid-20s. What's happening for kids is they are compelled to socially experiment, to physically experiment, to like test systems, to test how power works, to figure out attention. They're just constantly kind of like driven internally to do a lot of things. So when kids are high energy, I often try to think of it more like they have this natural inclination, this natural like drive to move their bodies around because they're still like developing themselves, right? They're constructing themselves. And so oftentimes what they need guidance about is like, what are different ways they can enjoy this energy they have? And it's not always about like run it all out or get it all out, because we always oftentimes like, I got to wear out my kid, right? Sometimes it's also, it's like a balance between big movement, like making sure your boys, Eileen, have gross motor movement in their day. Like I call it like a good sensory diet of gross motor. Gross motor means big movement. So you're using your big muscles. Like I just move my arms like this is really different from this, right? Or this, or this. Yeah. So make sure you build in some gross motor movement in their day. And what that can look like so many things. They could be in a sports practice. You could bring them to a jungle gym. You could do a relay race at your house, even inside when it's cold. You can like do things where they have to go over under chairs, and they can create a little obstacle course. There's a ton of ways to build in some gross motor. They need that. They also need mid motor, which is kind of the middle range of motion. And they also need to know, they need to practice mindful moments where they can begin to wrap their heads around the fact that even when they have big energy, they can do something about it to bring it down. So a mindful moment might look like the silence game. We used to play in Montessori, it's called the silence game. And you try to be as silent as possible for like 20 seconds. And then you do it and you celebrate that. And then you build up to 30 seconds. You know, you might be called, some people like, or think, well, what's the difference between that and meditation? It's just like the stripped down version of being mindful and tuning into what's around you and trying to quiet things as much as possible. You can also have them do things like listen, close their eyes and listen to music, and then open their eyes and tell you what they saw. Because sometimes kids will visualize things because their brains are really active. But part of that is like they have to, because their eyes are closed, they kind of tend to still their bodies. There's so many mindfulness games that you can play with your boys. And I just feel like if you can bring in the balance of those two things, right? Another really great one is any kind of freeze games where they're like dance, 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 and you stop the music and they freeze. Because think of the amount of awareness and control they have, where they get to move their bodies in big ways and then they freeze. You can also play a game called statue tag, where if you get tagged, you have to stay still like a statue until someone untags you. So a lot of ideas there that look like play or like little mini mindful things, but they're all building towards, what do I do with all this big energy? Yeah, Eileen, you're welcome. And Eileen said she's going to sumo up and really likes the idea that she can step in between to break things up in this way that's, you mean business, like they'll take you more seriously with that presence. Eileen, I really want you to step into that presence without needing to yell at them. Okay, awesome, great, love it. Really good question, such a good topic. I know a ton of people got something out of that when they listen to this. And if you are hearing something useful, let us know. Write it in the comments, write it in the chat. And if you're listening on the Raising Our Resilience page where all the hands are, the yellow, the golden symbol, you'll need to join the rest of us in the Raising Our Resilience parent group to be able to hear the rest. So I'll see you over there. Let us know what you thought, okay, in the comments. See you then. Oh, and the webinar, I'll put the link in. Okay, so let's say goodbye to those folks. See you later. All right, so now since you're in the group, we can continue here at our kind of more a smaller space here together. Another question that was asked is, how can I better manage transitions between activities like Zoom class and chores? Such a good question, right? Transitions are tricky. How many of you who are listening can relate to that? That transitions are tricky. Yeah. And some transitions magically go so well, and you're just like, you just suggest it, and kids, you know, go do it. they switch to the next thing. They seem to have no problem. And then other transitions, you feel like you're literally pulling teeth, like you're dragging them to the next thing, or you don't even succeed. They just kind of dig in and sit there and cross their arms, and that's it. Game over, and you feel pretty helpless and hopeless. So transitions can go so many different ways. So I really like this question because we've all been there. Yeah. Now, what I would say about transitions, and I think, let me see whose question this is. Let's see, JD. We've got, I know I had this, I think it's Jenry, and I think her last name is Disqua. Jenry, really good question. I'm so glad you asked it. So transitions are often something that will put the stress in your morning, right? Or in your evening. And the classic thing that I teach all my clients right off the bat when we talk about building really smoothly running routines, which is what transitions really are, they're little mini routines, is that if the same kind of transition doesn't work over and over again, just like what I was explaining to Jessica earlier, Jessica Hart, you're going to want to give it some attention outside of that moment. So in other words, don't wait till the transition comes to address it, okay? Just like I was telling her, don't wait till the disciplining moment to address it. And what you want to share with your kids is some ideas of how this transition could go more smoothly. And what I want you to lean into here is gathering some input from your children, especially Genry. You've got an 11-year-old. And for all of you who have younger kids, like just check this out because it's coming next. Your 8-year-old for sure, Eileen. And just kind of just share your observations first and say, hey, every time, I notice every time it's time to get on your Zoom class and, I end up coming over and reminding you several times, and then we get into this big power struggle over it. It's pretty unpleasant. Like, I'm not having a good time with it. Are you having a good time with it? And you just sort of like lay it out there and have a chance to sort of, chat about it. And once you kind of get the scenario in your minds and in your child's minds, in your children's minds, then you're able to say, well, like, what could go differently here? Like what role could we each play here to make this go more successfully, go more smoothly? So I have made agreements with 8 and 9-year-old boys, girls, kids, about like what the transition is going to look like and what tools we might use. So some examples might be it's like, okay, my job is to kind of notice that it's about 5 minutes before your Zoom class is up and tap you on the shoulder and say timer. And then you set yourself your 5-minute timer. That could be one version. So they each have a piece to do. And then the next thing is like, well, and when the timer goes off, it's up to you to turn it off and get up out of your chair and walk over to start your Zoom, to log into Zoom, for example. That's kind of like an 11, 12-year-old version. A smaller kid version could be, sweetheart, when I go like this, I need you to go like this back because and know that means there's 5 minutes left. And then when I go like this, you need to go like this back and nod, let me know that you saw that there's 2 minutes left. And then when I say, okay, it's time to go to something, that's when you turn it off or I turn it off. Like, let's say they're playing a game or something. Either you turn it off or I turn it off. And then that's when you can kind of ask, would you like to turn it off or would you like me to turn it off? You can kind of build in some choices there. And then you can even practice it through. I think you need to practice more with younger kids is what I've noticed until they kind of get that, like, okay, when we have these little talks, we actually do them. And then the older kids, you can kind of just like make a verbal agreement. Unless it doesn't stick. And if it doesn't stick, I always tell my clients, well, check for their understanding. Like, what did they actually walk away with, right? So I would say things like, so what's your understanding of what happens? Like, what do you understand that will happen when it's 5 minutes before your Zoom class? You'll remind me? Yeah, but like, what am I going to do? Oh, right. You're going to tap me on the shoulder and say 5 minutes. And it's like, that's right. And then what do you do? And they'll say, hopefully they'll be like, oh yeah, then I set a timer, for 5 minutes. And it's like, oh, right. Yes, that's it. Great. So I tap you on the shoulder and say, and say what I say, and then you set the timer for 5 minutes. Great. And then whose job is it after that to make sure you're on Zoom on time? And they're like, oh, it's my job. Yeah. So, and then you can even ask like, what are you going to do when the timer goes off? It sounds like I'm being repetitive, friends, but this little effort and proactive effort goes such a long way. Okay. So that would be my suggestion around transitions is to start by setting up like this, establishing this little mini routine. I have helped parents with twins that they had to get between who were like playing her back and forth. This mom, she was like, Vanessa, I need one of my 30-minute sessions. We need to book it today because I'm going to be bringing these kids to the park every day for my sanity. And I need to know what I'm doing to get them to come to me. Because right now I go to one and the other one runs away. And then I go to the other one, the other one runs away and it's not working. So they did this. They sat down, they planned it out. She got their input. They got excited about it. She set up the hand signals and they did it. And she got to have, there's like 2 weeks that she was doing this after some sort of summer camp thing. And she said, I got to have 9 good days with my daughters instead of 9 like stressful days because she had done the work after meeting with me to follow through. So I'm curious for Jenry or anyone else who would like transitions to run more smoothly, what's one thing you think you can do to help it run more smoothly based on what I just shared? Go ahead and write it in the comments or the chat so I can hear like what you pulled out of that. And you can also solidify, okay, that's right, I can do that one thing where I preview with them and we practice. Or I can get their input and make sure they understand. Whatever stood out to you, okay? Go ahead and put it in the comments or the chat, and Jenry will hear from you later when you have a chance to listen to this. Okay, got another one. How do I manage a child that gets upset easily when we need her to accomplish things? Okay, I'm hearing some stuff in there. This is a good one. There's some layers. You hear it too? Yeah. So first of all, when a child gets upset easily, you're really talking about emotional resilience, right? So what is going on with their emotional resilience? You know, and we're also talking about when it's about accomplishment, we're talking about motivation. So in this Ask Me Anything, we've hit on 4 of the 7 pillars so far, really 5. We've hit on setting limits that stick, establishing smooth routines, emotional mastery, sort of like emotional empowerment, right? We were also talking about motivation strategies. We'll be probably talking about some growth mindset in this one. And also how to approach things as a team, like how to build that sense of teamwork in the family. The only 2 we haven't touched on yet is like specifically building positive relationships and navigating conflicts. Maybe we'll get to that with our last one. So this is my 7 pillar system that my year-long program is based off of, for those of you who are wondering what I'm talking about. Anyway, so back to your question here. How do I manage a child that gets upset easily when we need her to accomplish things? I think this is Heather Skinner's question. So good. Okay. So Heather, what I can tell you is that you're going to need to look at what's going on for her that she gets upset so easily. Okay. So could be that, and let me know what resonates with you. Okay. It could be that she she really needs some more skills and self-awareness. So she's not even aware that she's getting upset until it's kind of gone too far. And then she's shut down. And so you're wanting to build in some like lid detecting, right? So we talked about lids flipping, so that she can start to notice when her lid is quarter way off, halfway off, 3/4 way off. And it's a lifelong skill that we can start building now with our kids. So like one of the things that, you know, I always encourage us all to do, parents, caregivers and children, is to tune into our body and listen to its messages, because our bodies will tell us things like, you need a break right now, you're tired. Our bodies will tell us things like, you're thirsty, better drink some water. Or your blood sugar's low, better get some calories in there. It'll also help us when we tune into our bodies to just pause and see if there's a way that we can kind of soothe ourselves or take care of ourselves. And that gives everybody a greater sense of self-mastery and emotional mastery, so that we know how to sort of manage our emotions. Because when you said the word manage, I'm thinking, well, you can manage her, but even more importantly, you're going to need to guide her to manage herself. So being able to tune into where she's at and what she needs is priority number 1. That's your long game, okay? The other thing is, and Heather, let me know what you pulled out of that, because I want to know what you're going to be focusing on. So you guys all get to try on what it's like to be my clients here. I'm like, you got this one thing, now let's work on it. Let's see where it goes. And also be in a group setting where you get to hear other people's questions. It's like such a great masterminding process. The other thing is about accomplishing things. So first of all, who set this goal and why is there a goal for accomplishment? So kids are often really disconnected with the goals that are set for them. And if we don't help them become emotionally invested and sort of intellectually invested in our goals for them, it's a kind of a coin toss if they're going to get on board, right? And the number one way parents do this is we try to explain to children why something's important. Please keep doing that. I'm not saying don't do it. Please keep doing it, and understand that sometimes we have to go a little bit further than, I have a good reason I'm asking you, or there's a good reason you should do this. You should do this because then you can get into a good college. You should do this so that you can understand the next set of math problems. You should do this because it's the right thing to do. It's the nice thing to do. All find reasons. But if that is falling short, it's not really getting through, there's probably more going on. So helping them address the emotional triggers or things that might be happening is one piece, but then also kind of hacking their motivation scheme by going beyond telling them why something's important, okay? So here's some of the things you can do in motivation, and this is my five-part model that I teach across a 3-day retreat that's included in my year-long program, and I invite some guests to. And if you play with me in June, you might even win a free pass to this Motivation Mastery Weekend that's happening in July. So keep coming to the Facebook group. I'll tell you more about that next month in June, because we have a 6-day training that has a prize of coming to the retreat. So interest, competence, autonomy, relatedness, and effort. Interest, how can I make this more interesting, or we, right? So is there something about this thing that you want her to accomplish that it could be enhanced to make it more interesting? Turn it into a game. Learn why it matters is one of them, which we just talked about, but also maybe there's just one little part of it that's kind of cool or kind of challenging or kind of, similar to something that they like. Okay. So interest. Competence. All right, is there some sort of skill missing here that we need to fill in? Maybe they're actually here and we're asking them to leap here. And what we really need to do is guide them and support them to their next step and their next step and their next step till they get there. A great example is writing. Writing is a huge task. We're asking kids to think of ideas, put them into words, not just pictures, right? Words, follow grammar, punctuation, and spelling rules, all while manipulating a tiny object with our little fingers if they're doing it by handwriting, or remembering where keys are on the keyboard. It's really complicated, and it's where a lot of kids put on the brakes. I've seen it over and over and over again. Almost all of my clients have had this experience with their kids. So as an example, okay, what if your kid has a great pencil grip, no problem writing the letters, but their spelling is challenging? So what you might do is, support them that whenever they come across a word that they don't know how to spell, they get to guess and circle it, and then come back to you, bring it to you later, and you can give them the spelling words. Or maybe you're sitting next to them and they get to ask you and you write it down and they copy it. It's a way to get from here to here instead of, let's write a story. Here's a piece of paper and a pencil. It's like, what? Another way that is kind of scaffolding, we call it, right? Getting them to the next step is, let's write a story about your vacation. It's like, well, I don't know what to write, because that's kind of going you should already have a story, is this leap, right? So we could say, well, let's think of one thing we did on vacation. And you think about it, you say, can you picture in your mind, who was there? What were we doing? Oh, that sounds a little bit like a story. How about we just write the first thing down? So we can scaffold for competence. So right now, Heather, we've gone through interest and competence. There's also autonomy, relatedness, and effort. I'm going to skip down to effort. The rest you can continue coming to these talks and or come to my retreat or become a client, and we can go deeper with effort. So effort is related to growth mindset, and growth mindset is related to believing that your efforts actually can lead to improvement. Now, it doesn't mean lead to expertise necessarily, but kind of taking what your set point is, your baseline, and moving it up that notch, and another one and another one. Yep. So growth mindset, if you've heard of it before, let me know in the comments. Say growth mindset, yay, let me know. Is believing that is actually knowing that you can grow your talents, your skills, even your personality traits and character strengths. It's true. with effort and practice, we can become a more mindful person. We can become a more grateful person. We can become a calmer person with practice and effort, time, attention, and practice. And we use really good tools and strategies to help us along the way. So if you match effort and the belief that effort works with tools and strategies that are efficacious, that are effective, put them together, then we grow. And kids often don't have this concept, especially if we as adults don't have this concept about ourselves. Because what we'll end up doing is saying things like, oh, I'm not good at that. I'm not an artistic kind of person. oh, I'm not a musical kind of person. I'm not a math person. I'm not a writing kind of person. And what you're saying is that you have this fixed quality that you can't change. And what's true is that people have varying amounts of talents and skills in these areas. But what's also true is that with time, effort, and attention and the right tool or strategy, you can move it forward. So I'm curious, when you say accomplished, Heather, what could be going on with her mindset? Could it be that the things that she's falling apart around are things that she believes, she has the belief, the fixed mindset that she's not good at, and that it won't matter how much she tries, she's just not good at it. I don't know if that's true, but I want you to check that one out, okay? Anybody else here think that they have a child who might have a fixed mindset about something? You might hear them say, I'll never be good at that, or I always mess up. I hate this subject, I hate math, or, they might always ask you to help and not be really brave about trying to do it themselves. It could even be, it doesn't have to be an academic talent or skill or even athletic skill or a musical skill. It could even be the belief that they can tie their shoelaces. Yeah. So I'm curious if any of you have experienced that. Let me know in the chat if that piece in the comments, let me know if that piece was particularly helpful to you and what stood out. Okay, friends, so we are wrapping up here. The very last one we have is how to effectively manage sibling rivalry with 3 kids. I love this one. I love it because I've done it. I've been there. I had 2 stepchildren who would, at times love each other and other times not so much. I have several clients who right now are dealing with sibling tensions. And one of the things I can tell you that happens with siblings is that no matter what, they're going to practice everything on each other because they're with each other all the time. So what you end up getting to is a lot like I did in the classroom. A lot like I did in the classroom when I had students, I would say, wow, you really get to try everything now while you're still young with each other, and you have a guy like guidance of a teacher, a loving adult, so that when you're older and adults, you don't have to figure this out all on your own. That's a really good thing. So the first thing when it comes to siblings, I would recommend is just sort of adopting this growth mindset and this sort of learner's perspective around this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for them to navigate relationships when they're in the safety of their loving home and in their loving home and their security of knowing that they can make mistakes and they'll be forgiven and love will still be there. So it's an opportunity. And one thing I was just telling my client recently, and I think, and she had come to it herself too through the work we're doing and through her own kind of queries and reflections, is that that you've got to help kids share how they're truly thinking and feeling. And especially siblings are great people to practice with because they'll have plenty of opportunities. So what I have my clients do, here we go, we hit the last pillar, develop a more positive relationship by sharing their true thoughts and feelings using I statements. Now, an I statement goes like this: I feel something, right? So I feel, and you can even say irritated, annoyed. It doesn't have to be a really big descriptive feeling. I feel irritated when you, or when people, or when this happens, and you describe what it is, because. Now, sometimes we use I statements to say, oh, you got to own it. You're not ever allowed to say you this and you that. And that's helpful. But what I think of it more as a tool as an impact statement, because what siblings do constantly is impact each other. And they don't always have the language to say, hey, I feel really frustrated that you're not listening to me when I'm saying stop that, because when I say no, I mean it. Like, I really do want you to stop. I'm not playing, right? And clarifying that. To be able to speak up and share a true feeling is probably one of the best relationship building skills to practice and get them really familiar with, so that it's just part of what they do in their communication, especially in conflict. There's that one. And then the other thing I would say is just continue to practice perspective taking, because kids are so egocentric. So perspective taking could look like, maybe outside of the conflict, try and see if you can interview your kids and get kind of their perspective on things. You can interview one child in front of the other so they can hear you ask questions and start and hear answers that kind of really give them a sense of where their sibling is coming from. Hey, when you got home yesterday, it seemed like things were kind of tough. Were you not feeling very well? Yeah, did seem like you're a little upset or grumpy. I agree. What might have been going on? Like, did something happen at school or on the drive home, or it just seemed like something was bugging you, and then if they don't say anything, it's like, well, what I noticed was that you had been trying to tell your sister to stop poking you in the car, and she really wasn't listening well, and because I was driving, I couldn't really get between you two and make a difference. So that's my guess. Is that part of what was going on? Yeah, okay. Well, so what was that like for you to like not to have your no not be taken seriously, and then they might be able to share more. And if all of this is happening in front of the sibling, well, they'll start to listen and get an idea of what was going on. And that could be really helpful. So I want to just give you this tool so that you can think about ways that you can bring in perspective taking and empathy into your conversations with your kids as a place to start empowering your children with the I statement. Jessica likes that one. Yeah, you're welcome. I feel like, sometimes it's amazing. People ask me like, where did I come up with these 7 pillars? And I'll tell you, it's from you. It's from you. It's from the parents, right? So, and from research. So it turns out that when we address emotions, motivation, routines, limits, conflicts, how to getting on that same page and really working on our relationships, we get to have it all as a family, and the kids have these incredible outcomes. So when we like emotionally coach them and show up in these ways where we provide this like sort of structure that holds them up, they tend to have the course of correlation between parenting style and better grades, getting into the college of choice, reporting better friendships, being able to navigate like risky things, risk-taking sort of peer behavior in their teenage years and making better choices for themselves. And they're also, it turns out, more resilient to the trends we're seeing in especially in preteens and teens. They're more resilient to anxiety and depression. And so what you do matters. Like, take one of these steps. Like Eileen might be doing the sumoing up and the mindful moments, right? And freezing games. Jessica, you might be thinking about now, like how to use these I statements in addition to, and perspective taking and showing some empathy for your kids and really getting that to move. I'm so encouraged when parents are stepping in and saying, yeah, let's do this. I just really admire you for it and want you to know that. And I also want you to know and make sure that if you haven't yet, you sign up to the webinar, because it's a way for us to continue these conversations and get you to a place where you have even more clarity on what you want to focus on in your parenting. Because the more clear you are, the more likely you are to take steps. The more you take steps, the more that kind of builds, and then you get all this momentum. And you see these really dramatic shifts. Most of my clients see a tremendous breakthrough by 3 months in, where they're like, I'm not yelling anymore where I used to yell, or my kid, the morning's going great, or right. And they experience that. And then they're like, what's can I do? And we are going through either 6 months in a private coach or a year in the program. And even after that year, people are sometimes like, oh my gosh, I could actually step into some major leadership here, and we could create the life we want instead of just sort of putting out fires left and right and just reacting to things. So much is possible through this. So just know that that's there for you and it's waiting for you on the other side of all these efforts you're making. So well done, everybody. I need to run. Really good to be with you. And come back next week on Monday at 2. I'm going to be going over ways to use feeling charts. That's really fun. But more importantly, make sure you register for the webinar so that at least you can get the replay, even if you don't make it live. You're welcome, Eileen. So good to have you here. You're welcome, Jessica, and everybody else who hopped on. We've got even more here to read from Jennifer Cormier. Make sure you check out her comment. It's really important for us to stay connected in these times. So go love up the comments where people wrote things, let them know what you think, drop some likes, and always feel free to post in the group and let me know how you're doing. If you have a win or a follow-up question or a new question, I'm here for you. Okay. See you next time. Lots of love. Bye for now.